So today we're talking platform and personalisation with James White. James is head of UK and Ireland at Nosto. Nosto is the number one AI-powered personalisation solution of choice, working with the world's top e-com retailers, helping brands to connect with their customers. And their clients read like a veritable who's who of retail. We've got Everlast, Gymshark, Huff, who I have some clothing by, Helly Hansen, Volcom, and many, many more. So James, great to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I guess what I want to start by talking about is platforms, right?
Yeah.
So today, Magento 1 obviously is killing off their support, and causing a lot of retailers to look at platforms and kind of assess what's best.
Yeah.
What are you seeing, I guess, in the space in terms of the different platforms and where they are right now?
Yeah, it's a funny one. I think Magento, I think it's supposed to be June is end of life for Magento 1. But then you can buy or agree a deal for a longer extension, so it's a bit up in the air still. But I think if you were doing this replatforming business, let's call it, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, you'd probably be choosing from Magento and like a Hybris or maybe a Demandware, or even bigger like an ATG, Oracle ATG or IBM WebSphere or something. But now you can choose in this mid-market, this like beautiful mid-market space, you can choose from BigCommerce, Shopify, Salesforce Commerce still, I would still put in that bracket. Then you've obviously got Magento, Shopware in Europe, PrestaShop. Yep. There's just so many options for retailers, and I think it's great because it breeds competition. You know, as we all know, we can play each other off against the other suppliers for better deals. That it increases the amount of innovation that the platforms have to deliver, makes them focus more on their USPs rather than just their price point. So yeah, I feel like it's like a prime time to be in e-commerce purchasing anyway, at least, and sales, to be honest, I think.
And how are those platforms that you mentioned, you know, BigCommerce, Presto, Salesforce, Shopify, how important is that decision for a retailer? Really, I mean, apart from all the marketing spiel, how fundamental is platform to their success?
Well, I think a good analogy for it's like your house, right? So you can go and buy lots of different types of houses. You can go and, as a development company, you can go and buy like the base, the foundations for a skyscraper, and that's like your Hybris or your whatever. So you kind of need to know what kind of house you're in the market for before you go and purchase. So if you're in the market, in the mid-market, you're probably looking for something on a cul-de-sac, something similar like that. So you need to know what sort of budget you've got. Then that's going to define what kind of house you're going to go for. And then you decide whether you want, the house in the cul-de-sac in the country or the townhouse in, I don't know, West London or whatever it is. And that's the kind of decision making you need to make, because it will define. You can't put a skyscraper in a suburban West London, so you kind of need to decide quite early on whether you're building a skyscraper or this kind of townhouse, whatever you want to call it.
Okay. And in terms of that scalability then, where are your views in terms of if I wanted to build a skyscraper versus if I wanted a little cottage in the West Country?
Yeah.
What platforms do you tend to feel like work best for the retailers you work with based on those ambitions and scale?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It's very difficult because, as we all know, with human beings, our ambition often outstrips our judgment sometimes. And so I think in terms of, again, like the mid-market to what we'd call like low enterprise, I think, and that's if you're looking at revenue, that's sort of like anywhere doing like 1 million a year up to maybe like 150 million a year. I think Shopify, Magento, Commerce Cloud, maybe a bit of Hybris, and then some of those kind of more local platforms I talked about, like VisualSoft, Shopware, PrestaShop, those are prime for that.
Yeah. And
then as you move things up, you go into like custom platforms depending on your team size. You might have a Hybris, an Oracle, whatever their new platform's called, WebSphere. Those are definitely still anchored to the skyscrapers. But then those mid-market platforms, they scaled all the way down and all the way up, particularly Shopify.
Okay.
I mean, you can get just started on Shopify selling one of these a month, and then you can sell 10,000 of these a day and still be on Shopify. So scalability-wise, that probably wins the day for ease of use and startup. But then, it gets pretty in whatever you call those circles that overlap each other.
Concentric circles,
yeah, it gets pretty concentric after that, I would say.
So Shopify is kind of coming out as a bit of a, from what you're saying, a bit of a safe bet in terms of maybe if you want to scale from small to large, and you do have those global ambitions, but maybe right now you're selling one water bottle a week, and soon you want to be selling thousands. That could be a good mid-market player, but there are some guys, if you're already maybe at the top or close to the top, whose bread and butter is on the 96th floor of the e-commerce.
Well, we'd all like to be,
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Awesome. Have you actually seen like an issue? Because I know platform is obviously seen as one of the big decisions, or maybe the biggest decision that e-commerce professionals make. Have you actually seen though a situation where platform has hindered their ability to deliver on their expectations or their goals, like realistically, and maybe even from a point of personalization? Like, are there things that in certain platforms kneecap potential growth because of that platform's capabilities or lack thereof?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're using the analogy again of the skyscraper in the house, if you're building a skyscraper, naturally there's so many other things to think about, and you can't just stick air conditioning in a skyscraper. It's not like one unit in the corner, it's built into the whole thing.
Sure.
And so I think integrations become a much more complex issue when you get into the bigger platforms, whereas with that, when you're talking about again like the Shopify's, the Magentos, the integratability is like super slick. It just things just work. It's like putting on a new pair of Nike trainers. They pretty much fit all the same way. Whereas when you're going and buying a really nice expensive pair of leather shoes, you have to break them in. There's like some complexities around that. So I think integratability is one of the key differences between those kind of SaaS platforms and the large enterprise platforms. But then there's also the decision, like some people, or one retailer that I was talking to the other day, one of our clients, he was saying, we're actually thinking about the technologies we want first and how well they integrate with the platform, and then deciding which platform integrates best with the technologies we have. And that was the first time I'd ever heard that, and I was like, this guy's pretty smart.
Was one of those technologies Nosto? Really?
Oh, of course, yeah. That's what made him super smart. But smart guy. I think that's a great way to think about it, because now this platform landscape is quite level. Now you can start to be picky with the technologies, whereas before you had to choose a certain set of platforms, and then after that you were just like, what kind of then what?
Shoehorn in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's another way to look at it, which you didn't have the luxury of before.
And would you say, like, based on that point, so the actual, not necessarily, if the platforms are becoming quite homogenous, especially in the mid-markets, is it almost getting to the stage then where it's actually not just the fundamental platform, but it is the additional layers of technology, the Nostos or the other platforms that are out there that can contribute to your e-commerce success? Are you seeing a world where actually those new technologies are being more critical to underlying success and beating the competition than perhaps the platform itself?
Well, that's a really good question. I guess I think there's like this kind of theme which we like a lot in Nosto, is this kind of best of breed theme. So there's no one technology. Like, it doesn't matter how good someone is. Like Salesforce, they're great at CRM. They're great at lots of things, but they're not great at absolutely everything, right? They have some core products they're really good at. And just like any company, they are really good at some things and not perfect at others. And I guess one of the things that we see quite a lot, particularly again in this kind of mid-market, low enterprise space, is there is no one player that's going to solve all your, let's say, customer experience issues on an e-commerce experience, storefront, whatever it might be. And so we say, well, okay, let's pick the best of breed that integrates with each other, that integrates with my platform, and delivers the outputs that I want.
Right, okay.
So like, first, what's the output you want? Then does it work with my platform? And then does it play with all the other things that I want as well? And that's kind of like maybe a good way to think about it.
Okay, cool. So
if I was doing it myself, that's how I would think about it.
Okay, so like I guess for people listening then, the things they should be thinking about is, what's the tech stack maybe they've got at the moment, and is that best of breed?
Or is it delivering on what the outputs they need, I think, first, and then back from there maybe?
Okay, so starting with their goals and objectives, then looking at what technology is in the marketplace that best delivers on those.
Yeah.
Looking at compatibility with platform, but also then looking at cross-compatibility across the stack.
Yeah.
So that you don't have, 3 best of breed platform things that none of them talk to each other.
Yeah. Because then you're
And
just
therefore,
re-siloing all your information, and you're just
Yeah.
it sounded so cool when I was buying all this stuff, and then now none of it works together, and I've got to spend like 50 grand or more, probably hundreds, integrating it all together, or having like a data warehouse where everything goes into, which none of us like to do anyway, so then you're screwed again. So.
And actually, just on that point, that's really interesting. You brought that up. So I mean, for if someone listening to this is in a situation where they're stuck with maybe loads of legacy crap that doesn't play nice, doesn't really talk to each other, just isn't delivering what they want. From the kind of price points and the positioning of the market right now and how many offerings there are and so on and so forth, is it almost a good time or is it ever a better decision to sort of rip out the heart, as it were, and put it in a new body?
Yeah, I think the first thing to look at maybe is what's of the technologies I've got, so of the ones I've got that maybe I'm not sure if they're performing or not, have I actually done had a discussion with that company as to like what their roadmap is and what their development cycle is? Because maybe there's something that you want that you're looking outside for that you're going to get. We have that problem, and we're reasonably innovative, I would say, where our customers still don't really know what they're actually going to get in 6 months' time.
Sure.
That's partly our fault. I would say partly theirs, both ways. But then also, if that's not the case, let's say you've been working with a provider of any type for 2 or 3 years and you've not got any innovation, well, you can probably say they're not an innovative company anymore and they served a purpose but they're not moving forward. So first work out, are you going to get the things that you want from the companies that you've already got? Because it's much easier than having to buy new, right?
Sure.
And then kind of assessing whether those technologies, a bit like we were saying earlier, where they fit together, what's the timeline, and then back to a question about what's the best time. Well, if you're doing a re-platform, when you're leveling the playing field, that's probably the best time. But you might have already done that, and you might be deciding. It's typically on like a yearly cycle, I would say, these kind of things. Some people commit for 3 or 4 years to a whole tech stack. Probably that's reasonably risky, I would say. Like 2 years maybe is the max that our customers commit to us, I would say, just because it is a super fast-paced industry. A year is probably a bit short, you might miss out. 18 months is still probably a bit. 2 years is a pretty good, I would say, breadth of time to experience the improvements or the lack of innovation that you might see.
Okay, cool. So I guess one of the takeaways there that we're touching on is looking at auditing when you're going through a re-platforming, or when that line in the sand gets drawn, that 24-month or 18-month cycle, looking again at what are your goals and objectives for the next 12, 24 months, and I guess doing a bit of a tech audit, right?
Yeah.
Like, are we still working with best of breed?
Yeah.
Are those suppliers still innovating in the marketplace, or have they gone stagnant and just going in some sort of cash cow mode? And does everything play nice? And is there an opportunity actually to go to over here and use this tech stack, and it all actually drives better results?
Yeah, one of the things we actually have that happens a lot is people say, customers that have been with us for quite a long time and they are leveraging a lot of the new things that we have. Which partners are you working with? Which partners are you integrating with that we could also use? Because we're loving what you're doing. So if you're playing well with them, that probably means they're doing something right as well. And then so suddenly you get this like less on like the agency or the consultant to like, I know what's best for you, do what I say kind of thing. It's like, well, you guys have given me great service already. Who else is giving great service that you guys know? So it's like this other kind of, lens on like what might be the best technology for you. And you don't have to assess it yourself, just like take trust marks from the other things you're using as well.
Okay, cool. Nice. So let's segue then from platform and tech stack into personalisation. So that's obviously your bread and butter, as you may say.
Yeah.
Personalisation has been talked about for a while though, right? You guys are how old as a company?
I don't actually know, but probably 2011, 13-ish.
Okay, cool. So for 13 years, you guys and I guess others as well have been banging the personalisation drum. Personalisation seems to be one of those topics that is on every year's things to do list.
Yeah.
And never seems to like actually almost
get done.
Get done.
Yeah.
So what's going on right now with personalisation? Like, why is it still relevant, and why is there this recurring theme of it being brought up as a necessary step in your e-commerce journey, but never actually coming off that list into their standard category?
Yeah, that's pretty. I think one of the main things, it goes back to this kind of like innovation thing. So if you dial back to like when Amazon started doing personalization, it was just like product recommendations were like, wow, it knows what I want. This is amazing. And then now that's like, well, just everyone should have that. Like, why has not every site got that?
Yeah.
So that's like now, that's personalization, but that's now expected, although a lot of people aren't doing it already today. And then you get the next layer, which is like, oh, when I get emails, now they are expected to be personalized, although a lot aren't. And then you get like more, I would say today, where you're expecting like content to be personalized, or insert anything on the website that could be personalized. So I'm male, I'm looking at male products, don't show me female products because I'm probably not going to buy them.
Right.
Or if I'm looking at kids products, show me just simple things like that, which sound quite maybe alien to some of us, but like that's now becoming expected. Whereas 4 or 5 whatever years ago when Amazon started, the product recommendations was expected. So we call that like core now. That should be core to your personalization strategy. Then the next things you want to start doing are this kind of segmentation, content personalization. And so there's like one-to-one elements to personalization, which are the product recommendations, like email personalization. Then there's the one-to-few experiences, which are like the banners, the site content personalization, email content, like all those kind of things. And then you're getting away from this like very niche one-to-one areas of the site within this like mass market one-to-all.
Okay.
And you're now getting like one-to-few, one-to-one, one-to-all, like you're getting these little, more and more of the site is becoming one-to-one.
Okay.
And then you're getting this like Netflix type where everyone's Netflix is different and they're like properly one-to-one.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talked about obviously Amazon and Netflix, and one of the things we talk about from a I guess customer experience point of view or customer service point of view is this trend of where previously if you were banking with, let's say, HSBC, you used to 5 years ago or whatever compare their quality of experience with NatWest, and so all HSBC had to do was beat NatWest.
Yeah.
But now I'm going HBC and I'm comparing them with Netflix.
Yeah.
Or I'm comparing them with Amazon.
Yeah.
I don't disassociate that fact, right?
No.
I don't go, Amazon's can you call them a bookseller anymore? But Amazon's a book
department store.
Amazon's a massive department store. So I don't not compare them with my bank. I go, why the hell is it so painful?
Not doing that, yeah.
Right. And so how have those platforms seeped in that sense into personalization in e-com?
Well, they just set the expectation basically for every single person. I mean, in the people in there sort of, I don't know, can't remember the generation Zs, X's, and whatever they are anymore, millennials, whatever. But so you've got like 20s, 30s, 40s. They've sort of grown up in their teens to 20s, 30s with technology. Then you've got the generation above that, like my parents, I would call them. They've got like technology in their 30s, 40s, so they have an expectation now that things should happen, and like that scares me in itself. But and then you've got the kids who literally are better on an iPhone than they are reading a book, and that's like also very scary.
Yeah.
But I think what they've done is they're not necessarily like driving expectations in retail; they're just driving expectations of technology or of customer service in general. And a really good example of that is B2B. So like B2C, we are in a B2C environment, like a ASOS or something, they know they need to give good customer experience, because it's like, if they can't buy from you or they don't like buying from you, they'll just go to one of the other 50,000 places that sell clothes. B2B is a bit more like, well, my loyal customers just buy from me because they've had an account for 20 years. Whereas even now, all the people that buy on a B2B site, they also shop online for themselves.
Yeah.
They get good experiences elsewhere. So if you give a shit experience, they're going to hate it with you guys, and they'll go to the other builder's merchant or the other whatever it is provider.
Yeah.
And so now B2B is like, oh, we need this stuff.
We need
as
to
well
pay
now.
attention, yeah.
We need to do this. We can't just have this like white page where we just put in SKUs and order like 50,000 items. So I think they're starting to think that that's like the next frontier, if you call it. And We don't all get to see that bit.
Is B2B e-commerce?
Yeah, I think so. That's where they're now adopting all the things that B2C's been adopting over the last few years.
Yeah.
And they're going like, oh yeah, we need bits of that. Some of these things don't quite work for us yet, but we're going to try and get them in as well.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. I think as well in the B2B space, one of the things that people, if they're listening, should, from my opinion, be thinking about is, are there things that don't require actually an offline sales team? It's just historically they've been sold by offline sales teams. I was dealing with a large, well-known research company who shall remain nameless, but there was actually no need for me to go through a sales process, right? But they forced me through a contact form. I had to wait 48 hours. I then had to go through a arduous process. That could have been done in the e-commerce subscription-based transaction.
Yeah.
So I think looking at their product set in B2B, and then also the point about, personalization, builders, merchants, or other B2B sectors that, have those trade buyers who are looking for those kind of trade experiences. Looking for those kind of consumer experiences, but in trade. You said before, though, I just want to break out some of the things you're talking about because there's a lot to unpack there. Mm-hmm. You were talking about kind of almost like a hierarchy of personalization, right? So like product recommendations, you're saying are
you should be doing
should be doing it. If you're not doing it, behind.
Yeah.
And so if why, from your experience, a retailer's not even like at that level, even if they're in B2C, because there's B2C sites I see all the time that don't even have
they just
recommended products,
or
have crap like irrelevant recommended products.
I think it's like sometimes it's a bit of an afterthought. Like I think the biggest challenge for any retailer is time, right? Like they are time poor. Like most of us, we're pretty time poor.
Yeah. And
so just trading the site, like selling stuff, is the priority. And then marketing the site is the second priority, like getting people to it.
Yeah.
And so those are the two priorities. And then improving how you trade and how you convert people who get to the site is still like the third thing. When actually, if you spent less time getting people to the site and spent more time converting them, and then start to add more to the top later, then you'd be better off in the long run. But it's like this, it's much easier to just pile like 30 grand or let's say 30% of your monthly revenue into ad budget and just throw more people at the site than it is to invest some time and probably a not insignificant lead time, like probably 4 to 6 weeks, in actually how do I convert these people better, then chuck another 30% at the top of the funnel. And so I think it's like this kind of like, it feels like a chicken and egg, and it kind of is. Like it's a hard decision to make. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, and then working basically from there on product recommendation. Oh, they've delivered this much uplift. Oh, I'm using Google Ad. I'm using special recommendations to target Google Shopping customers. Oh, and that's improved my Google Shopping CPC by 30%. Oh, shit, I can spend 30% more on Google Shopping now. And like those little things, they sound like nothing when I go, hey, I'm James from Nosto, you need product recommendations, and you're like, I've got loads of other things to do, leave me alone. But then if you go into the details of it and you actually like test it, then it's like, this is valuable. And I think it's just taking that time to do that when you don't have time is the first leap. And then what you'll find is people that have been doing personalization for a while, they will not go without it. But the ones that haven't got it, they'll wait a long time to get it. And then hopefully they get a good experience first time around and they're converted. But I think that's generally the challenge, is just time, really, more than anything.
So I guess I've read a stat, I'm not sure how relevant or how recent it was, but it was something crazy like for every £8 e-com spends on driving traffic, they spend like 1 on converting it. And I think that it's that leaky bucket thing, right? Yeah. Where it's like, crap, we need more to come out the bottom, so let's pour more water in the top, rather than fixing the holes on the way down. And it's such a baked-in philosophy of, if my conversion rate is 2% and I want to make 100 more sales, I need to drive up my traffic by whatever that is and times it out by 2%, rather than how do I get my conversion rate to 2.1%.
What you should be doing is doing both. If you add 0.2% conversion rate, add 20% to your top, and then you can keep growing. I mean, that's how, if you go and talk to all the other tech like the real tech businesses, like the Amazons and the ASOSes, that's how they're thinking about it. They're not thinking, shit, I just need to spend more money on this. They're thinking, how do I optimize like the button to be more clickable? How do I put my delivery messaging bigger for new customers, and then my loyalty points bigger for existing customers, that kind of thing. So yeah.
Is there well, just before I go on to actually, I think from what you said there, for the people listening, if it sounds like if they're not doing at least some level of personalization, then they really do run the risk of already being behind, and that's only going to compound over time, right? So yeah. I guess the advice coming from today is try and look at this as a priority and not like a nice to have addition, and that actually, from what you're saying, an effective, even basic like product recommendation strategy may well pay for itself, because it's freeing up ad budget that you can use further down the line to then drive more incremental traffic through. Okay, cool. And from that, I guess, recommendation space, moving down like to the next layer on, like what's the next element down from that? You were talking about one-to-one, one-to-many, like email, social. Can you like unpack those a little bit for us?
Yeah. So I think, so you've got the, let's call like product recommendations your pure like one-to-one element. And you can do that in various different forms. You could take the next level up in product recommendations. You can do like dynamic bundles. So, those kind of like shop the look, which is normally even if you're doing great product recommendations like this shirt or another shirt, you're probably still you're manually merchandising this shirt, these jeans, these socks, these whatever. So adding like an AI element to that is obviously saves a huge amount of merchandising time. But then when you start to move forward, it's like understanding the different customer, who are your different customer segments? Yeah. Like, what's your biggest segment? Is it a particular brand segment? Is it a customer who can't afford to ever buy anything till the end of the month? So you get these like peaks and troughs. Oh, maybe I should invest in Klarna payments and only promote that heavily to a particular segment of customers, for example, because they're the millennial segment, or they're the Gen Z segment that can't afford. They're the poor segment with no money, but they want to buy shit all the time. Yeah. So let's make that available to them. Like, sounds kind of a bit immoral, but let's let them spend the money they don't have consistently through the month, so that I can forecast my business for 12 months or 18 months, whatever.
You heard it here first. Credit.
Yeah.
Get
if in doubt, credit.
But it's a serious point, right? Which is looking at and one of the things that I think is really interesting about some of the work, for example, that Gymshark do, that I know you guys work with, is that understanding your consumer deeply. Yeah. Can you maybe talk a little bit about how that, as an example, kind of about understanding community and like tailoring what they're doing to that user group? Because I think it's a good example.
Yeah, so I think Gymshark's a super cool one, because firstly they've grown from like nothing to 100 and whatever it is,
incredible
whatever
story,
they reported in the last 4 or 5 years, and I think one of the key things they've done is they like stand behind their values, so like a very value driven business first. Then they kind of build the community around that, which is like, okay, so who's gonna wear this? Okay, it's the guys and girls who go to the gym pretty much every day, or spend a good portion of their week at the gym and looking after themselves. So let's help them do that further. Now they just launched this app which is around like fitness and workout routines. So that's completely secondary to the products they're selling. That's just helping their community do the thing that they love better and do it together. So I think that's one little example. Then they've just done this really cool campaign where they've had people who've like used exercise as a way to help them with like mental health issues or like big issues in their lives, and they've kind of recorded that and how that's gone, and then they give out awards for people who've made the most progress. Like they've got there's like, it's like the selling of the clothes is almost like secondary or tertiary to all the other things that they do now, and I think that's like a very hard momentum to stop. Like you'd have to basically have everyone in the office sat there like not doing any work for quite a significant amount of time for your sales to start declining, I think, and or just not selling any product, obviously. But yeah, I think those just brand building is like really hard to do nowadays, because it's so hard to step out of the comfort zone. And when you do it, I think those brands that do it, they do it really well. Yeah. And Gymshark's done that, I think, pretty well as well.
And I guess from a personalization point of view, really what you're talking about there is extending the concept of personalization to the actual end consumer's life, right? And thinking about being altruistic, and not being selfish, not just being like, we want to sell more shit.
Yeah.
So how do we flog more crap to these people? I'm not saying Gymshark's crap. I'm sure their products are great.
Yeah.
But how do we then actually give value above and beyond selling product? How do we give back? Yeah. And then thinking, as you're saying, like they're very honed in on who their community are.
They know better than most brands, I think, who their customer is. I think that's one of the main differences. Like a lot of times you'll go and meet new customers or existing ones. You say, oh, who are your... So like we're going to start doing some segmentation with you because you guys want to do some content personalization. Who are your main brand segments or who are your main customer segments? Oh, I've not really looked at that. I don't know. So where do we start? Well, you know your business better than we do. Like,
you tell me,
You know, so that and it's like, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, it's quite fun to explore that with them.
Sure.
I think it's, for a customer success manager, it's a, you know, they've generally got some experience with other brands, so then they can start to leverage that.
Yeah.
But when you go to someone like, you know, a brand that knows their customer base really well, they can go, well, these guys, they come back every week and they buy at least one thing.
Sure.
And then you solve for that, and then you can kind of build around, you can build like a structure of what you'd call like segmentation around that, whereas other people, they're like, we don't actually know. So then you look at the data first and you say, well, actually these brands are the biggest pulls for you. They buy at this time, they spend this much, they come back this many times before they buy. Okay, cool, let's solve for that. But yeah, I think that's one of the main differences is that these brands that go customer first, they really know that before. Whereas the kind of, not slower ones, but the brands that know their customer base less well, you have to kind of do a lot of work with them, I think, on that.
It's funny, when you were talking about that, the thing that popped into my head was the going almost back to our earlier chat about B2B, because one of the things that I think the inbound marketing piece for B2B has done is focusing brands' attention on things like buyer personas.
Yeah.
Is that like a missing element for a lot of e-commerce retailers? Like, do a lot of brands miss that, you know, this is Fit Sally and this is, you know, Steady Eddie,
Fat James,
and this is I need to lose weight James, and this is obese Gary. He's not our customer. But when you see brands, is that like a real missing piece of the puzzle? Is like, actually as a business, we understand our consumer to a more molecular level, and we can start to bucket these people, and therefore we can execute an effective personalization strategy.
I think I'm actually not a massive fan of personas. I think it's actually it can be quite restricting sometimes, even though I've just spent a few minutes talking about them. But I actually, it sounds stupid.
That's right.
But I think they can be quite limiting, and people spend like so much time. Oh yeah, we've spent years working on these personas. It's like, cool, so what have you done with them? Oh, not a lot actually recently, but maybe you guys can use them. It's like, oh my god, someone spent a lot of time on this and no output. And then so actually, I think sometimes it's better just to zoom out a little bit when you really don't know what to do with it. Just zoom out and be like, can be really simple things. Cool, most of our traffic goes to the men's. Okay, so let's just do a men's segment. Let's just do men's of any kind segment and start with that.
Right.
And and let's do our bundle recommendations there first. Let's do our content personalization there first. Let's do our email personalization and segmentation there first. Let's do everything there first.
Yeah.
Luxury men's, first time men's buyer, and go like that. Because men is not a persona, that is just a category essentially.
Yeah.
And then the problem is, if you focus on Gary, who loves to buy first drop products every time a new collection launches, you're going to get really, really niche. And we had like one lingerie retailer who focused on a really niche cup size.
Hopefully not Gary.
No, not Gary. Well,
maybe
obese Gary might have had a cup size. But one very niche kind of cup size. And then when we were looking at the data, to be fair, we didn't really cop this either, but a really good learning from it was when you focus on a really minute kind of specific persona, actually that makes up a tiny portion of your revenue. Right. So even if you improve that by 100%,
the effort required is
still the same as if you do it on the biggest segment, but the actual impact on your bottom line is 0.1% versus 10%, for example. And so like that was actually a really good learning for me personally, and I think the account manager at the time was like, yeah, we should not have let them do that, or not encourage them to do that. We should have gone like, where's the biggest win, and then let's trickle down if we've got time. Not where's the really smallest person that we really want to help, because that doesn't help your business, and then at the end of the day the maths don't work out there.
So really, I mean, I guess you're not necessarily saying that you dislike buyer personas. I think to paraphrase your point is, if people are looking at getting started with personalization, it's almost like, KISS, keep it simple, stupid, right? Like starting is often the most important point. And I think
hover at the high level, and you can always go down if you need
to. So if you're not on the path, then spending a year and a half building really complex personas, and maybe then to only find out that one of your persona categories only accounts actually for 1% of your revenue, is kind of a bit of a massive waste of time. That's oxymoron, but it's a massive waste of time to go through that process versus making a start, getting some movement moving, and then figuring out around that, how do we then iterate and improve on the back of that. And I guess that also links back to your point earlier, right, about time. And the limiting factor of time for e-commerce professionals, the amount of jobs they've got to do. And so a lot of this is about not just something's better than nothing, but if you're seeing this as this huge activity, right, where to do any personalization, we've got to spend, all this time doing personas and research and blah, 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 blah. And then it becomes this massive, like, Attila the Hun type problem, where you can never actually seem to start, because inevitably you go, oh well, actually, but we're already running paid ads, so let's just pump some more money into paid ads, right? Because it's human nature to do what seems like it's already started, rather than to tackle the biggest beast. Really, you could go split it straight down the middle, male, female, or some sort of product category level that's generic, start to personalize, learn, iterate, and go from there, right?
I think 100%.
Cool. One of the things I just want to touch on is what's the level where personalization gets, I guess, too spooky? So there's a lot of chatter at the moment about is for example Facebook listening and all this kind of stuff.
You definitely are.
You've probably had that, right, where you're talking about going on holiday with a friend, and then suddenly the next day it's like,
well, how they get around this? I actually have asked someone at Facebook before, because we had we're a partner of Facebook, and I went in and just kind of stone cold just asked them, and they were like, oh yeah, that's because all your friends are looking at those kind of holidays as well. It's like, but are they looking at going to Tofino in Vancouver Island, a really remote place? It's like, I've never told anyone about that except my girlfriend, and she doesn't even really use Facebook, and it's like, cool. So yeah, I'm still on the fence. I also had this really weird experience once where my I don't use Facebook anymore, but I was looking on my phone, actually in the Facebook office of all places, and I was looking at some photos, and the photos wouldn't load, but it came up with loads of written text at the bottom of the photos, and it was like mountain, and it was some photos I'd just been to New Zealand on holiday. Mountain, New Zealand, and it even had the mountain name. It was like Mount Hutt or something, and it basically had tagged the photos with a whole load of keywords, like that I hadn't obviously given it. And then it was probably laying those against my profile, and then
just amalgamating everything together to figure it out.
I was like, I didn't give you permission to do that.
But so I guess on that point, with when you're on Mount Hutt, and Facebook is like, Jay's at Mount Hutt. They're like, maybe he wants to go to this really remote place in Vancouver Island by some sort of level of machine learning. Is there a point? We obviously had the Analytica stuff. We had the Trump stuff, we had all this kind of stuff. People are becoming, I think, more conscious of how much data they're sharing, giving away. Cookie consent is obviously changing. Is this going to become harder to personalize, I guess, first thing? And I guess the second point is, what's the creep factor? And is that maybe generational, or is that just there is a level of creep that people are not willing to get to?
Well, there's a personal creep, which is I abandoned those things because I was bored of myself talking to people and being like, oh hey, so you did this, and this, and then you have nothing to talk about because you just described everything you've seen them do in the last 6 months. And that's the personal, and then you just feel like a fucking weirdo because sorry, excuse my language. Then you just feel like a weirdo because you've basically told them everything they've done in the last 6 months and you've not seen them.
Not that I've been looking at your profile that much, but how was XYZ?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't use Facebook much, but I saw you've done this, got married, had kids, blah, blah, blah. But so that's like a personal thing. I think one thing that's really noticeable is recently all the big ads, like Apple's been doing a big ad campaign, not about products, about privacy. Facebook's been doing the privacy ads. Google's been doing the privacy ads. They've all been advertising how private they are. That in itself is scary. If you have to advertise how private you are, isn't that like, I don't know, that just seems a bit backwards to me. But I think some like really simple things that can be solved by, again, better like integratability. Like when you booked a flight, for example, I saw a really funny kind of meme actually where this person had booked a flight to Miami, and then it was like promoting the flight to Miami on a news article where there was like Zika virus in Miami, fly to Miami kind of thing on the same page, and I was like, that just looks not great, and that's a really bad example of a personalised ad for a location that you're already booked to go to with a news article showing how bad it is to go to that location right now. So I think that's kind of when it's not just weird, but it's just not a good experience, and that can be solved. I think that's something that needs to be solved by everyone involved. Not really sure how, I don't know the tech behind it, but yeah.
But are there e-commerce brands that are shying away from? So we've got this basically surge of awareness in terms of privacy now, right? And it's a conversation that arguably should have been on the agenda for a long time, because we've basically been trading all our data for free pictures of ourselves. And suddenly it's in the consciousness of the public to the level where the brands are actually being forced to talk about it, like you say, advertising and so on. What's going to be the knockdown? Is this going to be a bit like once bitten, twice shy from e-commerce retailers? Are they going to start worrying about, or what should they be worried about or not be worried about when it comes to leveraging that kind of data and personalization for their customers?
I don't, to be honest, think e-commerce has too much to worry about, because they're actually quite far behind the tech three or whatever, the trifecta of technology companies, Facebook, Amazon, Google, and maybe Apple as well on there. But I think they're quite a long way behind there. So there's no, even like Sephora, who's got this like great joined up commerce kind of experience, I think they're still even quite far behind that, and they just don't get enough data on the individuals. They're still only, you have to remember, e-com sites, they're only looking at you on their site and buying a bit of third-party data from elsewhere. So it's not that personal. It's really your personal shopping behavior on ASOS. If you use ASOS a lot, sure, they know what you like to wear, but it's not that personal, really. Whereas when you get on Facebook and Google and those things, that's your personal life, your bank details, your where you live, where you work, what you've been on holiday, what your friends have been doing, everything. So I think, as scary as it might feel, it is quite far removed. Like when my mum's like, oh my god, if I buy on this site, they're going to know everything about me. They can't. All they can know is that you've bought Joe Malone's this scented thing and you live at this address, that's it. So I think, e-com is it's quite removed. I don't think it's, for me, who's quite conscious of that kind of stuff, I personally don't feel like it's a big thing, and I don't think retailers need to be super worried, apart from the GDPR stuff, obviously.
Cool. Okay, the dreaded 4 letters.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, brilliant. I guess just segueing from like Facebook, I just wanted to touch on channels in general. I mean, we've had a wave of channels, right, which came into play over the last few years. Social, obviously, being the biggest mix. And that seems to have, for now anyway, kind of settled on the Facebooks, the Twitters, the Pinterest, the Instas, the Snapchat. I don't know TikTok, if that's ever going to do something, but hey. But with all this plethora of stuff, right, do e-commerce, in order to stay personal to their brands and to their customers, do they need to be everywhere? Is that like a benchmark, almost like the product recommendations? If you're not on every platform, actively working those platforms, are you behind already?
Well, I think the main one is email. So email is pretty evergreen across almost every demographic, across every age group. I think that's a pretty solid one. And there's like, I know a while ago there's like emails dead, like that kind of thing going around, but it definitely isn't. But I think then the next thing when you're deciding what channels to invest in, it's again about understanding the general reach of your audience. So like, if you're dealing with my mum and that demographic, you barely need WhatsApp because she can't use that. You need messages, SMS, you need email, and you probably still need physical, to be honest. Like, you still need some physical mail,
like a brochure or something.
Yeah, like those kind of those older, like the Bowden type businesses, the Cox and Cox, like those style businesses. They still do really well out of those mail drops.
Sure.
Like, yeah, they can't measure them, but they get a shitload of sales just after they send them, so they're still working. Whereas when you're talking to, like the millennials and the Gen Z, they want to be able to feedback customer service through WhatsApp, through Facebook. They want to be able to send some feedback and get a response like that, and you don't get that with email, you don't get that with physical. And so if your customer base is there, that's where you need to be as well.
Sure.
So it's just about, again, not the personas, but so much, maybe it is, I don't know, but understanding where's the biggest segment, what channels are they on, or where are they discussing your brand, and where do they want to talk to you, and then just being available there, and then I guess deciding, I'm sure like there's loads of cool tech where you can see which channels are getting the most chatter and having the biggest response time and all that kind of stuff.
So it's interesting with the whole, email's dead, something's dead every year.
And it always seems to come back.
It's the consistent resurrection of channels. I think what I'd be interested in understanding your thoughts on, though, is all these channels and platforms. There's sort of a green moment, right? Which is where if you're an early adopter, if you were one of the first people to leverage Instagram as a brand, as an example, right, and start to really understand how that works and evolve with it, you're going to be way ahead. With all the other people that are coming into the space, there's a lot of people doing the same stuff in the same way, whether that's email, whether that's social media, whatever it is. Even the brochure example is kind of it's the same format, which can make our own version. Coming back, I guess, to the customer understanding, like what opportunities are there for e-commerce professionals to leverage these channels in a way that allows them to stand out, right? What are the things that they can do differently, or they can do better perhaps, in order to stand out? Are there any examples? I know when we talked last, you were talking about maybe Skinny Dip as one of the ways that you can maybe stand out.
I was listening to a talk, and they did the marketing director there, I can't remember her name. She had a really good example of how they were using Instagram, and they just started replying to all the Instagram comments and questions on their posts. And then when they started doing it, then the loyal customers that had bought the products or knew the products, they started replying to people before the customer service team even started replying. And then they almost like built this like organic customer service team from their existing loyal customer base, or whoever it was, just by being the ones to start it. They then like basically made it acceptable for all their customers to do it as well. Everyone's got access to Instagram, but Skinny Dip were the first ones to do that replying thing, or one of the first, I don't know, to do that replying thing. Gymshark were the first fitness company to do this fitness app with their, weightlifting app with their customers. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't, but that's the one that people are talking about. So it's like but everyone can create a fitness app. Under Armour have a fitness app, Nike have a fitness app, but do they have the same type of fitness app? So it's about using all the different platforms that are there, and then like having the creativity and the kind of like zoom out to like what do our customers actually want? What are they going to do with it? And then you can think of, I actually can't think of one on top of my head, but you can probably think of a million flops where someone's tried, like brands have tried to go like, oh yeah, do this everyone, and it's like, no.
Yeah.
And it's easy to talk about the great ones. There's lots of where those have failed.
Yeah.
But I do think it's like those failures and successes are the defining factors for the brands. Even when they fail, at least they've tried to do something like quite unique. They'll like Nike, I'm sure they've done loads of things that have messed up for them.
Oh yeah, sure.
But they've also done loads of stuff that's been amazing for them. Like the Jordan brand, for example. Like, why create a sub brand from Nike when you're already well known? Oh, because we can make another billion from...
Because Michael Jordan.
Yeah, exactly, you know.
The GOAT.
Yeah, so I think it always all comes back to being like unique to your brand, living your brand, you know, being creative with your brand values like that. Like that, I think is really the only thing that you can do to be unique, because everyone has access to the same tools, sadly.
Do you think, I mean, so one of the things you brought up was obviously Nike, or Nike, depending on which side of the camp you sit on. They should clarify that at some point, I think. They ran a campaign recently, right, with Travis Klimt, I can't pronounce his name, and he was the dude who started the kneeling at the national anthem football protest, and has since not been able to get an NFL contract as a result of that, which he's taken to court. And Nike put him as like front and center of their new ad campaigns, and the kickback was there were like I don't want to stereotype, but like a certain group of demographic who were posting videos of them burning all of their Nike products because Nike had endorsed Travis, who was seen by them to be a traitor because he was kneeling at the national anthem. But what they also did was completely draw in the audience they wanted, right? Who were the people who actually use their products as athletes and on a more day-to-day basis. But do you think that a lot of brands end up in no man's land because they're afraid to like have an opinion or have a view of something? So like Gymshark, people know what Gymshark stands for.
Well, they like posted, Gymshark actually posted the other day, said like, don't be a dickhead or something on LinkedIn, and like they have that in their office. And it's like, don't be a dickhead if if you're ever unsure what to do. Would I be a dickhead by doing this?
The dickhead test.
Yeah, the dickhead test.
You've heard it here first. The dickhead test.
And I think that's like one of those things where it's like, oh, with this brand saying dickhead in their office and in public, that's not very good.
But that draws that pushes away the people that they don't want.
That's cool.
Yeah,
I should actually do that as well.
Yeah,
like,
it pulls in the people you want.
Yeah, I shouldn't be a dickhead. That's a good thing to do.
Wait, you waited for Gymshark to tell you this? Like,
well,
this wasn't a mansion.
But I think it's cool to like, I don't think everyone should be outspoken all the time, but I think you should, like, people sometimes lack something to believe in a little bit, and I think that's, being not afraid to say, I actually really do think this, I'm gonna live by it. And as a brand, that's even harder to do because it has its risks. If I say something, it's reasonably harmless, whatever I say, but if a brand starts saying it, they risk, like you say, customers, revenue, everything essentially. So I think it's about being cautious, but also taking a risk to put yourself out there away from the pack. Yeah.
And I guess the downside of not taking the risk is that they end up becoming no one knows what they stand for because they stand for nothing.
Yeah, they're just stuck in mediocrity.
Mediocrity sucks.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess from this point of view, just to take away some of the key lessons here, what we're really talking about is everyone's got access to the same channels. So if you're on those channels, if you're using those different platforms, then the key question is what are you doing differently, and how are you going to be able to use a deep understanding of your customers, use a deep understanding of your brand and what you want to stand for, and communicate that in a way that's different so that you draw in a tribe that associates with those values, and you're not stuck in some sort of no man's land, standing for nothing, and therefore attracting no one as a result.
Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on.
Awesome, cool. So we're gonna into the last kind of leg now. James, you've been great. So
sprint or a jog?
We're gonna do like a reasonably fast-paced jog.
Okay.
It would be a sub 4-hour marathon.
Okay,
one of the things I want to know is if you could summarize, like, what are the biggest mistakes people are making right now when it comes to personalization? Like, what is the almost number one thing that if people are doing this, they need to stop it because it's probably almost definitely causing them issues, whether they realize it or not?
Yeah. What? If they're doing personalization, if they're not doing personalization, they should be investigating it. That's the first thing. And I would start with the core things, just the really simple things, like product recommendations, like email personalization, understanding when to target your customers, with any sort of information, not just bombarding them and not hitting them with everything. For those that are doing some sort of personalization today, I think it's what's the net, like if you're doing it today and you're not really sure what the impact is, that's probably because you're not measuring it properly, or you haven't looked, or you haven't even thought, oh, I just need personalization, let's just get it and then see what happens. You haven't thought first, what's the output I expect from this piece of technology, and then have I measured the output? Has it been successful? How can I make it more successful? And that, I think, doesn't just cover that covers tech or e-commerce in general. Is just measure everything, test everything you can within reason, as long as it's not detrimental to the impact of whatever it is you're testing, and try to understand then, because then you can never go forward if you don't understand like the base that you're working from. A lot of people say like, I want this to happen when I do personalization. Cool, what's the base? Oh, we don't really know, we just think we want this better.
Okay.
It's like, oh, okay.
Not that clearly defined, right?
So I think you've got to know what your base is, just to know where you want to get to and what's realistic. Oh, I want a 4% conversion rate. What are you at now? I'm 0.5. Cool, that's not going to happen, because that would like revolutionize your business. So it's like understanding what the base is and what the incremental is. But I think that doesn't apply to personalization. That only that applies to everything.
To the whole brand. Yeah. Okay, cool. And then top secrets and tips. I know you covered some there, so I don't want to go over too much old ground. But is there anything in particular that you feel like is a best kept secret, or something that is quite simple to put into practice, but perhaps really moves the needle over time?
I think there's a bit of like a kind of, I don't know what you call it, like a scale of like merchandising and personalization, which we haven't talked about at all, and I won't go into massive detail. But merchandising is like, this is what we should show to sell more of it, right? Personalization is like, this is what the customer wants to see, so let's show them that. But actually nowadays, you know, with Nosto and to be fair, most technologies, you can balance this a lot more. So you can say, well, I actually want to show all these Nike shoes in black with white ticks to this customer, but I make a higher margin on these 5 as opposed to these 10, so let's show them these 5 first and try and get them to buy those.
Okay.
So people think that personalization must be a sacrifice for merchandising or revenue, whatever you want to put it in, but actually you can do the two together, and I think that's something that people don't always know or understand how to leverage from.
Okay, I think that's a really, really important point for people listening or watching. It's you know, from what you're saying, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, right?
Yeah.
We're still in business.
Yeah.
We're still here to make a buck.
Yeah.
And so if there are ways that we can make things more tailored and relevant, we should be doing that. But we can also, with the technology these days and wonderful people like Nosto, you can also look at ways of balancing your commercial objectives with your customer objectives and wants, and it doesn't have to be an all or nothing play.
And if you can't, you should be questioning why you can't. I feel I would if I was buying.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as a customer, you want something that's personalized, right?
Yeah.
And so, but if in your example, if I went to look with black Nike trainers with a white tick, as long as I'm seeing black Nike trainers with a white tick, I'm not going to feel duped.
No.
You know, if your highest margin good is a fluorescent blue Adidas trainer, and you shove that in my feed, I'm going to be like, you know, WTF.
What's going on?
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, and then to wrap up, a parting thought. So when we were talking before the show, we were talking about authenticity and kind of putting the customer first, and you had a really nice kind of way of summarizing that, if you recall, without leading you too much. So I'd love if you could share that with our guests.
Yeah, I actually stole. I was going to try and claim this as my own, but I'm not, because they may or may not be a client of ours, hopefully soon. But this marketing lady from Skinny Dip, she made some really good points, and one of them was like, if you're in any doubt about how I should move forward next, shoot for the heart, not the head, basically. And it was kind of back to the Gymshark thing. It's like, go for the heart, the thing that's going to have the biggest like, wow, that's fucking cool, rather than actually, oh yeah, that's going to make us the most money, so let's just do that. And because ultimately that will have more impact over time than just this, I think. That was a really good quote. I'm going to try and use it as much as I can. So kudos to her. I can't even remember her name. I'm really sorry, but yeah,
we'll put some attribution in the
we'll
in
put
the
some
show
like
notes,
hashtag skinny dip or whatever we need to do to get it on there.
We'll
but
make sure she gets some.
yeah,
some
it was
credit,
really good quote that I think resonated with me definitely, but probably a lot of other people as well.
Yeah, definitely. So shoot for the heart, not for the head, and that I think comes back nicely and ties this whole conversation up really in a bow. Well done. Which is this idea of, fundamentally when we start to dig beneath the techniques, the tools and the strategies involved in personalization and platform as well, because we touched on that, really what we're talking about is being a bit selfless, being customer centric, and making a start on trying to make that experience better and not necessarily being overwhelmed. Like I think your point about the hardest part is starting, as it were, journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. And so you have that heart over head focus that you talk about, but fundamentally make a start and look at progressing things from where you are, because ultimately you're going to have to start being different if you want to stand out.
I think so.
James, anything else you want to add before we close this up?
There's one point about that, like this thing of 1,000, whatever it is, something starts with 1,000. One step to 1,000. Yeah, anyway, you get the point.
That one.
So there's a great TED talk that I listened to the other day, and the guy was saying about how he used to go to work every day and he walked 45 minutes and he just listened to music. And what he did was he got rid of all the music on his phone and only listened to, he actually wanted to learn language at the time, so he got rid of all the music off his phone and only put these language CDs on there. And so it's like to actually shift from just doing what you've been doing for years to do something that's really impactful, like implement personalization successfully. You've really got to get rid of all the other things you're doing that are taking your time away, that are easy to do, and focus only on the thing that you want to do. And just because personalization or any of these technologies in e-commerce are a nice to have, doesn't mean that you don't need to spend a lot of time at the start learning them, understanding how they work, to actually learn German rather than just listen to Kanye or whatever it was you were doing for years. So you've actually got to make some big shifts to have a proper impact. And I think people think having a big impact is really easy, just to I'm going to buy this and it's going to change my business. No, invest time to make an impact. I think that's the key.
Yeah, nice one. So you've got to be committed to solving the problem, not just buying the widget to try and half-heartedly solve the problem. You've
exactly.
got to get rid of Yeezy and get the Dutch tapes in, or the German tapes in that
whatever
example.
it is.
Cool, man. James, it's been awesome. Appreciate you having you.
Thanks very much.
So much.
Cheers.